Hi, it's Kathy from Raven Vintage. Today I'd like to do a junk journal flip through of a handmade journal I made using my Swan Lake Printables kits. And I'd also like to demonstrate some of the reels you may have seen me do some very quick tutorials, and I'll show you how I use those products that we created in the reels in this journal. And I'd like to share a few tips with you on how to arrange your journal, and then I also have a piece of advice about finding your journal style. So let's get started. I have this little box of goodies. I call this my gatherings, that plus the papers. That's what I curate for when I have an idea for a journal. I try to find everything. I might not use everything in this box, but it's nice to have it all in one place. It helps keep your desk tidy, and you can keep that theme going throughout your journal by making sure you always use the same lace instead of finding, well, let's be honest, we know what our desks end up looking like. So that's one tip, is just to make sure you, try at least to keep all your gatherings in one spot that you're going to use for your journal. And then when you're done, you can put everything back. Like this would go back in my thread box, and these will go back in my bead box. But while you're working on this journal till it's complete, keep a little curated box of your gatherings. Okay, so in this journal, my Swan Lake kit has been the most popular kit in my Etsy shop, and Swan journals were quite popular for some time. They might be slowing down a bit now, but in this journal, I used two printables from my shop. I used the Swan Lake kit and also the lined paper kit that accompanies it. That lined kit is neutral and can go with anything, but it does pair really beautifully with the Swan Lake kit. I used those two printables, tea-dyed paper, which is just regular copy paper, scrapbook paper, pages from an illustrated book, which happens to be this one. I have a couple copies of this from a thrift store, and tracing paper, newsprint, and then I used vintage ephemera, vintage photos, vintage fabrics, and then some embellishments, and some of which were handmade, which we'll get into that later. So I wanted to demonstrate using new papers that we purchase, mixing them with recycled materials, and then of course with authentic vintage. And I want to show how you can create a cohesive theme and a beautiful flow to your handmade junk journals by mixing new with old. It can be done, and it can be done beautifully. A couple tips too, we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's just get started. So basically this is I use chipboard, 3 pieces, front, back, and spine. And this is a page from the Swan Lake Junk Journal kit. And it is, when you print it, it looks like this, minus the spine, of course. So this is, all of my printables are 8.5 by 11. And this journal is just a little bit smaller. And the reason is I wanted to just print that 8.5 by 11 page. And then I wanted to be able to wrap the paper around. I wanted this edge to be wrapped all the way around, so therefore the journal had to be just a little bit smaller. So this guy actually measures, it's 7.5 by, I think it's 4 3/4. I'll just double check that. So normally my journals are 5.5 by 8.5, which is just basically my printables folded in half. It keeps it very simple. I have a printer that prints borderless, so it keeps it very, very simple for me. Let me try this way. So this is 7.5 tall by about 4.75. Yes, that's what size this journal is. Now she does have a bit of a gator mouth. She's a little chunky, but we still love her. We're not going to hold that against her. So I just, you know what it's like when you're making a journal and you just don't know when to stop. That's what happened here. So I am not going to put a closure on it. I think she just looks really, really pretty the way she stands, or the way she sits or lays, or whatever you want to call it. I am not going to put a closure on her. Whoever purchases this journal, they might want to tie a ribbon around it, but I'm just going to leave her like this. I did add a tassel. What are those called? I added this hardware to attach this handkerchief because I didn't want to cut, I don't know, I didn't want to cut this one. I kept trying to find ways to use it whole in my journal, and it just kept laying on my desk like that. So that's how I ended up using it. I used cord, waxed cord actually, to make these, and I tied, see if I can get this in here. There we go. Okay, so you can see where I tied this bundle to the hoop, and I'm not sure I'm going to show it there. There we go. So basically tied around the handkerchief, and then I tied that to the hoop. Oops, there we go. See how it's just tied around the handkerchief, and then I added it to the hoop. It just kept tying till it was secure. And I used three pieces of cord. I'm going to say about maybe 18 inches wide, and then tied it around like you would, beginning to tie your shoelace. And then you end up with six dangles, strings, so 3 from each side. And then I did this beading, which I've done a dangle before with fabrics and lace, but not with beading so much. So this was kind of new for me. So I just did from here where it's knotted, I came down about 1 inch and did a knot. And then I would add 3 elements and then a knot. I'd leave some space so that these could move back and forth. Added 3 more elements and a knot, 3 more elements and a knot. That's basically how I did that. And I did buttons. I did different kinds of beads, pearls, and little charms. So I really like the way that turned out. It's not noisy. It's nice and quiet. It just clanks a little bit. It's not too bad. Okay, so this image is from the Swan Lake kit. And what I did was, paper itself would scratch, tear. You couldn't really do a journal. Well, it wouldn't last long. So what I did was, I really wanted to use this image though, and I first tried canvas, and it just looked kind of dirty. It was cool how it printed out on the canvas, but that's a video for another time. This image in particular just looked dirty. So I started again and used paper, and then I used Mod Podge. So I'm going to see if you can see that. So you take your paintbrush and your Mod Podge, and you just kind of mishy-mashy all over, and and then this is 2 coats. It won't be 3 because I know I don't have that kind of patience. I'm pretty sure it's just 2. And those swish marks make it look like an oil painting. So it looks cool and it protects your paper. It's a win-win. So that worked really well for this. So let's buzz through this. So this is the vintage handkerchief that I used. I purchased these at a nostalgia show. They had holes or rips in them, so they were inexpensive. But since they were already ripped, that was okay. I was going to continue to rip them up, and I used every little bit and piece I possibly could throughout the journal. This is my signatures. So here's one of my tips I wanted to tell you. When you are doing your signatures, try to use the outside page and the middle. Make sure those papers are thicker paper than your normal papers, because we want them to be stable. We need stability for when we're sewing to the spine. If in fact that's the kind of journal you're doing, I recommend thicker paper. So that's one of my tips. The second tip is, when you are arranging your signatures, before you sew them together, before you add all your pockets and flip outs, try to use a formula. So an example of putting your papers together, you've got, let's picture you have your stack of printables, you have your stack of music paper, you have your stack of tea-dyed paper. So start putting them in a pile. Printable, music sheet, tea-dyed paper. Printable, music sheet, tea-dyed paper. Fold them in half, and then take a flip through and see what that looks like. And then you're going to want to try to partner up pages so that they complement one another. So when we get through, I'll show you what I mean by that. So once you have your formula kind of figured out, you're going to tweak it a bit. You're going to rearrange things, then go through and add your extras, like your extra sheets and your, you might have had some vintage papers to add or envelopes, that sort of thing. But your basic structure starts with a formula, and you want to keep it flowing nicely. So try that out and let me know how that works for you. Okay, so let's flip through here. One of the other tips I have is to keep a very simple color palette. So this journal, coming off the theme of the Swan Lake Printable kit, is basically blue, a touch of yellow, a touch of pink, and then the neutral vintage, which could be tea-dyed or vintage, actual vintage paper and vintage envelopes, tea-dyed paper, music sheets, and like off-white book pages. To me, that's all like a neutral ivory or a neutral beige or grayish or whatever you want to call it. But that's basically your neutral vintage, is all falls into one category. If you have like extremely dark dyed coffee paper, that's something else. But I think this vintage aged paper falls into that one category. So basically you have neutral, one major color, and then a couple of complementary colors, unless of course it's a colorful journal you're going for. But in this case, this romantic kind of light and airy journal, I kept the color palette pretty minimal. Okay, what else do we want to talk about? Another tip I have is to use a variety of papers, types of papers. So here I've used book pages, tea-dyed paper, which is done with just copy paper. These are vintage notebook pages, vintage music pages, and then I've printed using cotton paper. It's a cotton linen blend. I'll link them all below. I've used tracing paper to print on, and I've also used newsprint to print on. So the variety of papers that you use give your journal some dimension and some interest, and both a variety of textures, both visual and physical to the touch. So it really makes that's what makes junk journals so interesting, is that we can mix things like that and make, it's like a hodgepodge of things, but it ends up being a beautiful hodgepodge. Okay, so let's go. Inside, I just have using that vintage hanky, I've got a little pocket made. This is an authentic vintage glassine envelope. Tim Holtz dolly with, I've added the wings to that. I like to add at least one of those to each journal, if not more. Okay, I won't go through every single element of this journal. This journal is for sale. There's whoever gets this journal, there's a ton of writing space in here and a lot of elements. So this is the faux vintage tape that I've made. I have a reel about that, and in my Patreon, which I just recently opened, I will be doing a video to demonstrate how to do that. There's vintage ephemera, tea-dyed paper. There's more butterflies. This is scrapbook paper. It's like a vellum with a gold foil. And then I've used my little Sizzix machine to do, I only have a few folders, so I'm not really doing a lot of that yet. This is something else I demonstrated in my reels, how to get this dimensional look, starting with a plain piece of paper. So that's just copy paper. And then, I'm sorry, actually, this was just like cardstock. And then using different stamps and colors. That's in another video. And then to make, since this journal was a little bit smaller, I used a ruler and tore off all the edges to make it smaller. And I kept all the strips. And then I have another reel that demonstrates very quickly how I use those strips and fold them all different ways to make these little clusters. Here is a rusted staple. So that is another video, but in this flip through, I'm just going to touch on them. But these are rusted staples and rusted paper clips that I rusted myself with a process. And that's a really neat project, and it looks so good in your journals. Okay, moving along. So here's another one of those little cluster things, and I've made, these are strips of the papers, the papers that I kept while I was, like my scraps, basically. So here's an example. Tea-dyed paper, scrapbook paper, printable, Those are all tea-dyed paper. All mixed together into one cluster. They look like they go together. Here, this is something I always pick up at thrift stores or antique markets if I find them. It's a measuring tape. So you can find these nice cloth ones or paper ones. This one's coated, but as long as it's nice and pliable like that. And I use them for belly bands. And this is an authentic vintage photo that I fussy cut. And we'll stick that happy couple back in that pocket. Another way you can use these, like I said, belly bands this way, that way. You can also use them to edge your pages. So many uses. Oh, and you can also use them for tag toppers, which I'll show you in a minute. So using that lace throughout, this is a vintage attendance record. So I'd like to, okay, here's an example of partnering your papers. Any of this blue stationery you see, that's part of the Swan Lake kit. So I paired it beside this to pull the blue through. And then without this, it just looked like that. But by adding this cluster, which has authentic music paper, printables, scrapbook paper, tea-dyed paper, this balances the ivory color here. So you make your pages as one spread look nice together as much as we can. The shabby yellow roses are part of the Swan Lake kit. Here's an example of mixing new with old again. So new scrapbook paper purchased, cut to card size, a piece of authentic vintage ephemera, and that is from the hanky, the vintage hanky, and then that's a faux rusty staple. So new and old together, very happy together. Everybody's happy. Okay. This is some vintage tracing paper, or I guess that's onion skin maybe. This gal is from the Swan Lake kit, and I printed her on cardstock so that this is a journaling card. There's a video I'd like you to check out. It's oh, what is her name? A Dreamy Bohemian. Dreamy Bohemian. She did a Whisper of Peace, I think it's called, her video. Check that out on YouTube. She did a beautiful journal using the Swan Lake kit and some other printables from others, but there's a lot of pieces from the my Swan Lake kit in there, and she uses this beautiful gal on the cover, and oh, she deserves to be on a cover. That was really well done. So here's the center of a signature using scrapbook paper, nice and thick. Here's a project I demonstrated before on my Instagram. It's a hidden journaling spot, and again, you probably can't tell, but that is printed on tracing paper and then attached to cardstock. And that goes in there. Here's an example. Here's two of the ephemera cards from the Swan Lake kit. And here's where I use the measuring tape again. Here's where I use the faux vintage tape. Those are both journaling cards, and I've used another cluster. Here I've used a cluster to indicate, hey, that you should, like when you turn the page, that lifts, so that indicates to the user that you can open that up, and that there's something else of interest there. There's our beautiful swan. I printed that on cardstock to use as a journaling card. And let me see what else we can go through here. This is one of the Swan Lake, actually it's one of the lined pages from the lined pages kit. So I've just done ghost images basically, or very transparent images from the Swan Lake kit in here. And then I've inked this up around myself manually and added a bit of that vintage lace. Now the lines are really, really faint in that lined kit. You can write beside this one, or you can write right through it. The lines go right through. It's a flip out with some vintage papers. And again, these end of a signature, beginning of a signature, using that thicker paper from that book I got at the thrift store. So I have a couple of these. A very nice, as long as you look for books that say illustrated when you're at the thrift stores, and you'll find some good ones to use for your journals. This is an Edith Holden page I've made into a coin envelope, and there's some faux vintage tape on there. This is a page number that you would find in the corner of one of the Edith Holden pages, and then I've added a little fabric behind that and used a rusty paper clip. That's a pocket. This is from the kit, so I've done this as a flip down with journaling space. Here's an example of using tracing paper. It gives a really nice sound, texture, and a very matted print, like a matte look. It's really pretty. So here again, partnering my pages, there's just a little bit of blue in the sky here, a little bit of clouds there, and it mimics here, and then the aging on here mimics the colors there. So it's a nice partnered page spread. On the back, this is really cool too, because that looks like a ghost image through the back. Here's a project I did on the one of the demonstrations. It's one piece of 12 by 12, and then I made it into this trifold thing. And let me see if I can demonstrate. So pocket, 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 and then I glued it so that this is also a pocket. So glue, 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 and then you can glue these sides as well, but I left them as a flip. So, and that's closed. So this is a flip and a flip and a flip. And then underneath I have some more Canadian vintage ephemera. This is a receipt, and then there's like a waterfall of guest checks there for journaling spots. Okay, here's another example of pairing your papers. So this belly band is from the Swan Lake kit. So here's two ways this works. I've just glued it here, wrapped it around made a fold, like a crease, and then around, and glued it here. So it's a double duty belly band. The blue, I selected this with the ephemera part of the kit because the blue complements the stationery. And then one of the reasons I selected the gold throughout this to give it a little glam was because of the gold in this ribbon here. So it all flows together. This is some vintage photos that are added to the kit, and some more Canadian vintage ephemera to the kit. That's from Woodstock, Ontario. Tim Holtz again. And here's another great example. Here's another tip for you. I like to make a notch between the pockets here because it reduces some of the bulk. I actually use my envelope punch board for that, and I'll demonstrate that in another video. But here's a great example. Purchased new scrapbook paper pad. That's this page. Just fold, it's double-sided so it folds up for pockets. This is the printable from the Swan Lake kit, used as a journaling card. This is just copy paper that's been tea dyed and then made into an envelope. Inside is a printable that we're going to use for journaling space. And then this flash card here is from ephemera purchased at an antique store. So this is a great example of purchased, printed, handmade, authentic, all in one spot, living together in harmony. Very happy and very beautiful. There's more of this tracing paper, and the clouds in the sky complement the stationery here, and then the script here complements the dark trees there. Things to watch for when you're putting your pages together. Here's another great little secret. This is from the kit, this little yellow rose. That's the yellow complementary color I was talking about. Flip that up, and then I can open this, and then inside is another ephemera piece from the kit that's a secret journaling spot. So that I printed that on cardstock, so it feels like a journaling card. And then this clips back on, and actually that double duties for another journaling card from the kit printed on cardstock, and I use that clip on that side to hold that. More lined pages, tea-dyed paper, music paper. This is from the kit as well, and I used it as a flip out. And then inside, this is the same as the cover. I just printed this on regular paper. This is actually newsprint. This has that really nice buttery feel to it. It's makes a little bit of noise. So another example of using different papers in your journal for a variety of textures. Here's another one of those. This one I did glue, so you've got pocket all the way across. And this was a thinner paper I used for this one rather than the cardstock. But inside I did something different. I added a bag. So if you add something with a gusset, because sometimes we want to put things in our journals that are a little bit thicker, that don't necessarily fit into a regular pocket. So it's always nice to have a bag somewhere, inside the cover, somewhere throughout. And then here's a demonstration where I use a 12 by 12 again. This is just from a paper pad. I think it's Recollections. So let me open this right up. So this is a strip, probably 3.5 inches or so, from a 12 by 12 piece of paper, scrapbook paper, folded in half, and then folded in half again, so that you have 4 sections, and then you go fold, fold like that. I rounded the corners, and I tucked it so that this one is inside, so it's glued underneath, and then the flap is on top. So this one is different. It's folded in 3. So I rounded the edges there. So it's just there's just the 2 folds, so it has 3 sections, not 4. So folded in thirds is what I should be saying. And then that goes over top. I could have put one of those little closure things on that, but this baby's getting so, she was getting so thick, I don't have the heart to add anything else to it. Here's a little train ticket that comes with the Swan Lake kit. I printed that on cardstock. There's another envelope made with tea-dyed paper. This is the fabric, the birds. It's from the kit. The Shabby Roses. Again with the cluster. There's a fake envelope from the kit. I added some, to make it look a little more authentic, I added some of the faux vintage tape. And of course that's a journaling card. And I'm using a vintage envelope to hold that. Here's some vintage Canadian ephemera again. That's porked over. More tracing paper. Another pocket made from lace. Here's an example. This is the only reference to the ballet in the Swan Lake kit whatsoever. There's just one little advertisement. It's a cigarette advertisement, actually, one of the old ones with ballerinas on it. So this is some of the same lace. And then that's a journaling card. We're almost through. Again, more journaling cards from the kit, just printed on a light cardstock. These are an ivory cardstock, or white, sorry, ivory cardstock is nice too to use. Here's tea-dyed paper that I ran through my Sizzix. And then here I've just taken an authentic vintage photo, added some of that faux tape, added some authentic ribbon, faux staple, a purchased, what are these little bobby pin thingies called? I forget what they're called. Added some pearls, and then on the back, I just flipped the back up to make a pocket, added more faux tape, added the cluster that I made out of my scraps, and another vintage photo of which I added a little bit of that tape too. And you can see that tape is cut in half. So you have your regular Scotch tape or transparent tape, and then I cut it in half to make some smaller ones. And what else have we got here? So here's an example of another flip out. So I've just, for this envelope, there's another card from the kit. This is from the kit as well. I've added faux tape. We don't know what the rest of her face looks like. She's the mystery woman in the kit. This pink ribbon I've used in a few spots, and that's to complement the touches of pink throughout the kit. So she has pink. That gal I just put away had a pink dress. The lady standing in the water feeding the swan, she has a pink dress. So there's just a little bit of pink. So that's why I added just a touch of a blush pink ribbon, just to help pull that pink throughout the journal. Another cluster. And then some more authentic vintage ephemera. This is Woodstock Gas and Light Company. This is a printable from the kit. And then this is an authentic vintage ledger sheet from a small ledger. And this is an old doily. So you can see it's a 3 signature 3-hole pamphlet stitch journal, and with no closure. Whoever purchases this, they may wish to put a ribbon around it. I have ribbon if they want one tied around it. When I ship it, I probably will. But that's, there she is. She's chunky. So I hope you got a feel of how nice it can look to mix old with new. I know some people are really against printables, and some people love printables. There's some in that Swan kit, like that landscape scene with the tree and the, I will print that one 10 times because I will use it over and over, and it matches with so many other things. So again, try to remember to keep a simple palette. Use thicker paper for the inside and outside of your signatures. Use a variety of papers to create dimension, interest in different textures, both visually and physical to the touch. Try to use a formula to arrange your signatures, like printable music sheet tea-dyed, printable music sheet tea-dyed, and then go through after, rearrange things so that they partner nice, and then add your envelopes and your flip outs and stuff. I like to then sew everything into my spine, and then I add pockets and flip outs, but you can do that at either stage. It depends on what you're used to. So I hope I've demonstrated that mixing new and old in a variety of papers can have a very cohesive theme and keep a beautiful flow going to your journal. Thank you so much for joining me on this flip through. And another thing I want to leave you with is there's so many videos to watch, and that's why I'm very thankful that if you're watching mine, thank you. But there's so much to learn. And what I did learn, probably a little too late, I wish I figured this out, well, I wish I believed it sooner. You will find your own style. Your style will find you. So just keep trying different things, and you will find what you like, what you keep getting drawn to. You will find your style, or your style will find you. So don't get hung up on trying to make your journal look like someone else's. Try to just practice. Practice. You don't need to practice an entire journal. Like maybe you might want to just practice making coin envelopes for a while. Or maybe you might want to just practice making clusters. You will find your style. Trust me, it'll come to you. I can recognize folks' styles. Like I can recognize a vintage chick. I can recognize her shabby chic style. If I saw a journal, I'd probably know it's hers. She's really coming into her own beautiful style. I could recognize David, Junk Journal David or Davido, I forget what his handle is on Instagram, but I would recognize his journals. He has his own distinct style. I would recognize a Ruby and Pearl journal. I would recognize probably a Treasure Books journal. So everyone kind of has their own. Oh, and then Look Cafe Craft. Of course, I would recognize her work as well. So everybody has their own style. Some people have a variety of styles. So don't worry about creating a style until it, like I said, finds you. Don't get hung up on this is how I'm going to do it always, because I thought maybe I would just do the shabby chic thing way back when, but I got bored with the pink and blue, and eventually I wanted to try other themes, and some days like, oh, I'd love to do a beautiful shabby chic journal, pink and blue, but it'll find you. So thank you for joining me on this flip through today, and thank you for joining me in any creative journey together that we endeavor. I invite you to check out my Patreon page and see if you might like to join me there. It's a little more of an intimate space where we can get to know each other, and I will be demonstrating some more in-length tutorials. I will do some. I don't have much on my YouTube channel yet. I will, but I just find it time consuming to do the filming. I work full time, so I do what I can, but I do like to make reels, and they're just like little mini quick tutorials. Some people like that micro learning. Other people like it slowed way down. So I think Patreon's going to be that happy medium. where I can do some short videos. So we'll see. Thanks to you again, and bye for now. We'll see you in the next video.